Before we jump into the topic and before I introduce myself, let's do one fun activity. Ready?
Ready.
Who knows this character? Or rather, who loves this character? I love him. Okay, for those who don't know who Sheldon Cooper is a fictional character from a famous TV series called Big Bang Theory. And he is child prodigy with genius level of IQ, but he almost lacks in social skills, and that kind of creates a humor. So with this background, I'm going to show you few very epic and the famous dialogues from the Big Bang Theory. And what you have to do is you have to identify Sheldon's personality trait from those dialogues. Ready?
Ready.
Next one. Can you identify one prominent characteristics from this dialogue? Just one.
Not empathetic.
Yeah. Yeah. Arrogant, lack of humility. There is one more. We all know that Sheldon likes to brag about his intelligence. Can you identify another characteristic? Yeah, exactly. Narcissist, self-centered. There is one more. Can you identify?
Selfish.
Lack of empathy. And there is this last one, and my favorite one. Can you identify?
Arrogance.
Lack of self-awareness, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, so from this, it is very clear that Sheldon doesn't fit as an example of normal or stereotypical person. Of course, for obvious reasons, because he is extraordinarily genius, and due to that, he is very good at the cognitive skills, like mathematical skills, logical reasoning, analytical skills which are mostly operated by your left brain. But at the same time, he almost lacks in social skills and emotional skills like empathy, common sense, social cues. And that's why on the personality continuum, he is usually characterized as someone who is an extrinsic person. But wait. Why are we doing the PhD here on Sheldon's life and Sheldon's personality? Reason for that is our today's session is centered around this topic, imbalance between your cognitive skills and social skills and its impact on the professional success. And now before we actually jump into the topic, let me introduce myself. Hey Google, I'm a bit tired today. Can you please introduce me? Oh, thank you. Really appreciate it. Okay, I'm Leena Bora. At least that's what Google says, and I trust Google more than anything else. So I'm a consultant at Equal Expert Lisbon office. I work mostly from India. And I spend few months every year here in Lisbon. So okay, now let's actually jump into the topic. Research says that, and several articles which are published in well-accredited websites like Forbes, Huffington Post, and Harvard Business Review, it suggests that your IQ is not the sole predictor of your professional success. IQ, which is intelligent quotient, which denotes your cognitive ability for logical reasoning, problem-solving skills, that is not the sole predictor of your professional success. In simple words, having high IQ doesn't imply greater professional success. There is a paper published by Daniel Goleman on this topic in Harvard Business Review, is regarded as one of its top 10 most read articles of all time. So if we are saying just based on the IQ, if you cannot reliably determine the professional success, then let's first see what we can actually reliably determine from the IQ. With the combination of high IQ and sincere effort, we can reliably predict person's academic success. This high IQ ensures the threshold competencies, which are minimum entry point to get into a good college or get into a good job. So this is what we can reliably predict based on the IQ. Academic success, getting into a good college like medical, law, engineering, or getting into a good job. But there is no direct relationship between high IQ and the professional success, or for that matter, even the happiness in personal life. So if we are saying that just based on the IQ, if we can't reliably predict the professional success, then what do we need along with the IQ to be successful? And answer is emotional intelligence. Today we are going to see what emotional intelligence is, and especially how it is different than our understanding of conventional intelligence. So what is emotional intelligence? Today we are going to see in detail what emotional intelligence is and what it means to be an emotionally intelligent person. But here is a brief introduction. Emotional intelligence is a crucial skill because in a day, on an average, we experience 400 different kinds of emotions. And whether we realize it or not, that can really drive the bus. So emotional intelligence is an ability to deal with that emotions, to understand those emotions, acknowledge those emotions, and respond to them effectively to have the desired behavior. So in a nutshell, emotional intelligence is managing your emotions and managing your relationships with others. So with this brief introduction, and we have just barely scratched the surface. So are we saying that emotional intelligence, we understand what emotional intelligence is. It's like managing emotions and reacting those emotions effectively. So person who is very high in EQ, that is emotional intelligence, but who is very low in IQ, will definitely be a successful person? Answer is no, and in fact big no, and that is the common misunderstanding about the emotional intelligence. We cannot predict person's success just based on the IQ, and we cannot predict person's professional success based on the EQ. In order to be successful, a person or a professional needs to be a T-shaped professional. What is a T-shaped professional? A professional who is very good at the cognitive skills, like problem solving, analytical skills, logical reasoning, but a professional who is also domain expert. One example of domain expertise would be, if you are a programmer, your domain expertise would be coding skills, algorithmic skills, understanding different architectural patterns, understanding different frameworks, and applying them correctly. Another example could be, if you're a finance person, your domain expertise would be crunching the numbers, understanding accounting domains, understanding the fiscal behavior of the companies. So these are the required skills to be successful. These are the must skills. And in order to get the mastery over this skill, we need an IQ. So IQ is not a nice to have or an optional thing to be successful. It's the must thing. But what we are saying is that's not the only thing. Now imagine. Okay, and we haven't yet finished this T-shaped professional, what it means to be a T-shaped professional. We are going to revisit it. But imagine every company has their established criteria for recruiting quality people. Like Google has their own criteria, Equal Experts has their own criteria, and companies don't compromise on that criteria. That means once you get into a job, it is already confirmed that you have met that criteria, you have satisfied that criteria, and that's why you have been hired. But that is true for everyone around you. So can we say that everyone around you is as intelligent as you? Well, their expertise and skills will be different in terms of domains, technology, tools. Their skills will be different, but it's just a matter of exposure. So if everyone around you So everyone around you is as intelligent as you, and everyone around you falls in the same range of 1 standard deviation from the minimum IQ criteria defined by your company. So if everyone around you is as intelligent as you, then in order to outstand in a crowd, you need to be intelligent in a different way. And that's where emotional intelligence comes into a picture. So this EQ and IQ, they are independent things. They are not substitute for each other. And we need both in order to be successful. There is one caveat here. These EQ skills, emotional intelligence skills, starts mattering a lot as you start climbing the ladder. Like if you go into a leadership role, or if you are in authoritative position, this skill starts mattering a lot. These skills, EQ skills, doesn't matter that much if you are an individual contributor. Individual contributor means if you are for example, if you are a programmer, or if you wish to remain programmer all your life, well, and that's not a wrong thing, it's just a personal preference. Then if you are an individual contributor, then this EQ skill doesn't matter that much. Well, it still matters because you still interact with others, but their degree varies. Another example of an individual contributor could be if you are in a creative field and if you are a painter, then this EQ skills doesn't matter that much. Now, we understand a little bit about EQ, and we haven't yet started what emotional intelligence means. So now we understand EQ, like, managing our emotions and paying close attention to that, and managing our relationships. So with this definition, are we saying that I will be an emotionally intelligent person if I try to be nice to everyone all the time? Or if I try to be yes bass or flattery person, then I will be an emotionally intelligent person. This is very inadequate and inaccurate definition of the emotional intelligence. I'm sure by doing all these things, I will be a likable person. But I'm also sure by doing all these things, I won't be a respectable person. So now let's see what actually emotional intelligence is with this background. Emotional intelligence is not 1 or 2 skills. It's a set of skills. It's a cluster of skills. These are n number of skills that comprises the emotional intelligence. And these n number of skills are broadly classified into these 3 categories: personal competence, social competence, and emotional cognitive competence. Today, we are mainly going to focus on the personal competence, and we are just going to touch base on the second and the third. So let's start with the first one, personal competence. Under personal competence, these 7 skills falls under the personal competence, and we are going to see them one by one. So let's begin with the first one, self-awareness and the assessment. Self-awareness is a foundation of emotional intelligence. In simple words, it's about being mindful and paying close attention to your emotional state through self-observation and self-reflection. It's about having the complete understanding of our general preferences and intuitions. So, by deliberately paying close attention to our emotions, thoughts, physical state, it helps us to get a stock of our internal emotional state. For example, how am I feeling right now? Am I feeling angry, or am I feeling disappointed, or am I feeling depressed? Because feeling angry is very different than feeling disappointed or depressed. So knowing exactly what exactly you are feeling right now, and how these feelings are manifesting themselves in our body. Because if you are angry, you will experience a fast heartbeat, maybe tension in the shoulder, dry throat. So paying close attention to your physical symptoms. By knowing how exactly you are feeling right now and what is your emotional state is, then what we do after that we are going to cover in our second point, that is self-management. But it is very important to assess your emotional state. What is your emotional state, and why is it important? because you can work on something only if you know what's actually going on and what's actually wrong with that. That's why self-assessment and self-awareness is very important. One prominent sign that we could be low in self-awareness is if there is a vast divergence between what others think of us and what we think of ourselves. If there is a vast divergence between these two perceptions, then we could be low in self-awareness. On one end, imposter syndrome, and on other end, overconfidence. These are two extreme ends of low self-awareness. When the self-reflection is missing, people always find it difficult to learn from their past mistakes, like especially in the stressful situations, and they feel victim and they blame others. On the other hand, when the self-awareness is highly developed, person tend to see inwards and they try to change their thoughts and perspective to have a desired behavior. And that is actually real self-assessment is. Now let's see what are the different techniques to be self-aware. Check-in and journaling. During a day, set aside or dedicate some time to pay close attention to your emotional state. Assess your emotional state by asking series of questions like, how am I feeling right now? What is the source of it? Are there any physical symptoms due to that source? And try to answer them honestly. At the end of the day, try to keep a journal of different emotions which you have experienced throughout the day. And research says that this technique is really effective in order to be self-aware and to know what's exactly going on with you. Label emotions. Once we know how exactly we are feeling, try to label the emotions. As I said, being angry is very different than being disappointed. So identify the emotions and try to label it exactly to know what exactly you are experiencing in the moment. Try to get regular 360-degree feedback from everyone, from your client, colleagues, customers, managers, basically from everyone to know how you are doing. So that's about the self-awareness and assessment, and let's move on to the self-management. We often find it that we are very good when it comes to the self-awareness, that we understand what our current emotional state is and what is the source of it. But we often find it very difficult to overcome that state. And that's where the self-management comes into a picture. Self-management is a technique to deal with your negative emotions effectively. Negative emotions like anger, fear, frustrations effectively, and make these emotions work for you and not against you. And again, why is it important to deal with those negative emotions effectively? Because these negative emotions are strong feelings. They inhibit your ability to think clearly, stay focused, and thereby it impacts your overall decision making and thereby wrong choices. So it's very important that we address these emotional disturbances at the root of it and we try to fix it from the root. Self-management is not just about dealing with the negative emotions. It's also about self-control, impulse control, and delaying the short-term temptations for long-term benefits. And one example of that could be, we often find it in the news, that celebrities who are excellent in their respective careers, like sports, acting, politics, they are involved in sexual scandals, drug overdose, taking bribes, and this is a result of missing self-management. And now with this background, let's see what are the different techniques for self-management. First is the declare timeout. If you are not happy about something, just declare timeout to yourself. Or if you are disappointed, just declare a timeout to yourself. It could be a simple thing like counting 1 to 10, or maybe going for a walk, taking a break, or even in some cases, taking a vacation or going for a sabbatical. In my case, especially if I'm not happy about something, or if it's or if it's a bad day, I shut down everything. I don't force myself to work. I go to sleep, I restart next day, and I start with fresh mind. And at least this really works for me. Next is a time travel. Again, very simple technique, but very effective. I use this technique all the time. Let's do one exercise. Okay, let's do one exercise. Try to think about some unpleasant incident which you might have experienced in past couple of months. Maybe a small argument or an upsetting situation. Please think about it. Please think, how did you feel at that time and how did you react to that? And now come back and think about the same incident now. How do you feel about it? Do you feel the same? I'm sure now you have the pretty neutral feelings about the same incident. And in fact, in 6 months' time, you won't even remember those small incidences. That's what the time travel technique is. When you're not happy about something, just get into a habit of thinking, will this thing even matter in 6 months' time? Is it worth paying that much attention and spending that much energy into that? And trust me, this is really effective if we get into a habit. Bomb diffusion. Again, let's do one exercise. I'm going to show you few logos and you have to identify their brands. But here trick is, you have to do this real quickly. And when I'm saying quickly, I'm not talking about seconds, I'm talking about milliseconds. So ready? Focused? Okay, let's begin. Come on, fast.
MCC, Apple, McDonald's.
So what happens here is our brain keeps these associations and mappings. And that's why when you see that logo or when you see that image, it triggers the brand in our head. And it happens in the matter of milliseconds. And it's all neuroscience. And this is the technique we are going to use. So when we encounter any upsetting situation, we often experience emotional outburst. And this is result of something called as amygdala hijack. In that, you try to react first and then think later. And everything happens in a split of second. So you really want a technique which can work for you in a split of second. When a bomb diffusion squad gets an emergency call about some bomb plantation somewhere, what do you think these guys do the first thing? Very first thing. Do you think these guys, gather around the whiteboard and discuss the strategy? Okay, how can we avoid it in the future and what we can do about it? What do they do first thing? First thing they do is everything to defuse that bomb, right? And that's what we want to do is, we want to map this image and have that association with the diffusion. And whenever you are angry, we need to get into a habit to remembering that image. And it needs a practice. It doesn't happen magically, but you need to get into a habit and you need to practice. When you're not happy about something or disappointed, or when you're angry, just remember this image. This image will trigger you the diffusion, and that will remind you to diffuse that situation, anger situation. Maybe by staying calm or maybe by having a humor in that case. It's an effective technique, but again, it needs a practice. And you need to make that association in your brain that this image is diffusion. Next is cognitive restructuring. Again, many psychologists and mental health professionals use this technique. But it's a pretty standard technique and even we can use it. Idea behind this is very simple. We want to replace our distorted and irrational thoughts with more healthy and beneficial thoughts. And that we do that with a systematic technique. Unfortunately, due to the time constraint, we cannot discuss that technique. But if you just Google about it or maybe talk to me after a session, you would know what cognitive restructuring is. And these are all proven techniques. And the last are writing and sharing, exercising, meditation. I think we all know what these techniques are, and I think we all understand how important they are. So we won't be discussing it here, but nonetheless, they are very effective. So if you're still following and still awake, you would know we were talking about the personal competence. We have just covered the self-awareness and self-management. And now let's go to assertiveness. Assertiveness is an ability to be able to express your views and opinions clearly without being arrogant and without being aggressive. To understand it, and that was quite theoretical definition, but to understand it better, let's see what are the qualities of an assertive person. Assertive person never fears to express their views and opinions in front of their teams or in front of their seniors. And they do this without offending other person. And they use the correct body language, correct tone, right choice of words to express their feelings or opinions. Assertive person always support their opinions with the data and the facts. Assertive person is comfortable in saying no whenever it is required. When it comes to the IQ is a fixed thing. Well, we can change it, but we can't change it drastically. So your IQ remains fixed more or less throughout your life. But that is not the case with EQ skills or emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is not an innate skill. These are learnt abilities. It has a neuroplasticity nature. That means we can change it, we can improve it. And improving those EQ skills is really a journey. Maybe I can share with you my journey. But before that, here is a disclaimer. When I'm talking about these things, it doesn't mean that I'm very good in all these skills. I'm good at certain skills, I'm very good at certain skills, and I totally suck at certain skills. So don't quote me after this talk on anything. Okay. So with this, okay, let's see my journey with the assertiveness. When I began my career, I used to fear to express my views and opinions, especially in front of seniors. And that was getting in my way, and that was becoming a limiting factor for me in terms of recognition and opportunity. So I decided to work on it. And that was my stage 1, where I wasn't expressing myself. In stage 2, I started talking in meetings. I started expressing my views. But whenever I used to get a counter argument, or whenever I used to get a resistance, I used to get defensive or even arrogant in some cases. So I fixed one problem and I introduced new problem. It's like what Neha was saying, the production code without test. Like you fixed one thing, but you break other things. So that's what happened with me. But there was one more problem. Since I'm very good when it comes to the self-awareness, I used to realize my mistake later, that I was defensive and probably I was aggressive. But the problem was I wasn't very forgiving about my mistakes. Since I was the person who always aimed for perfection, I never used to forgive my mistakes. And this whole thing used to cause me feel low, and I used to stop expressing myself. And again, after some days, I used to start expressing. So this was going on in a loop, and definitely it wasn't helping me. So I again decided to work on it, and now I'm in a stage 3. This is my current stage, and let me tell you honestly, I'm not yet there. So at least one thing is sure, that I'm not arrogant, and I consistently express my views whenever it is required. So it is a huge improvement than the stage 2, but at the same time I still get aggressive and I still get pushy, and my tone changes sometimes. Ask meetup guys, they can elaborate on it, or they can even write an essay on that. I love you, Joanne. Okay. There was an improvement, but there are still scope of improvement, and that could be my stage 4, to work on that aggressiveness and pushiness and overexcitement. So, but there is one more improvement, that I don't try to be harsh on myself for my mistakes. So if you see, improving these EQ skills is really a journey. And this journey has taught me one very important lesson. We always say that, giving feedback is a skill and we need to learn to give feedback to others. But I will go ahead and I will say, first we need to learn to give a constructive feedback to ourselves. I learned that don't be too harsh for your mistakes, but at the same time, don't ignore it. When we are in right emotional state, try to address our mistakes and think what we can do about it. Maybe it could be a simple thing like going and saying sorry to the person. Or in other cases, if we can't do anything about it, just instruct your mind that we can't do anything about it, take a lesson from it and move ahead. Don't stuck there. Since we are talking about the feedback, I would also like to touch base one point, because assertiveness and feedback, these are very closely related. We always say feedback means making other person realize for their irrational behavior and undesirable behavior. I don't think so that's quite right. We all live in a volatile and stressful world, and we all have our personal problems, financial challenges, health issues, and we all have our bad days. And we tend to behave irrational on those bad days. So that irrational behavior doesn't call for a feedback, or that's not a candidate for feedback. In fact, if anything, that's a feedback for us. Can we not become more tolerant towards that behavior? Maybe it's a bad day for that person, but it's not a bad day for us. Can we not become more accommodative for such behavior? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we shouldn't give a feedback, but I'm saying we should give a feedback when we see a consistent pattern, or if there is a one-off situation, but if it is totally unacceptable, then only we should give a feedback. I think in rest all other cases, try to give benefits of doubts to other and maybe discount the odd behaviors. One last point on assertiveness. If you have a female colleagues in your team, please be aware that they go through the monthly physical challenges every month. And during that monthly cycle, they are emotionally hijacked by their hormones. So don't expect a consistent performance or a rational behaviors from them all the time. As it goes for a male colleague to be aware of this female issues, it's also female colleagues' responsibility. If they are not able to perform or they are not able to focus due to this thing, talk openly with the team about it. I know it sounds very comfortable for male and female, everyone, but that's what assertiveness is, having those uncomfortable conversation in most comfortable manner. And this thing starts mattering a lot as we are talking about reducing the gender gap, diversity, hiring more women professionals. So it's very important that we are aware of all these issues. Okay, so that's about assertiveness. Next is the self-motivation and the self-regard. We always think self-motivation means working extra hours, harnessing new skills, or working on our pet project. That's not the real definition of the self-motivation is. Self-motivation is how consistent are we with our goals in an adverse situation. How fast can we rise up in the case of failures and setbacks? Can we stay focused when things are not going in our way? That's the real self-motivation is. And self-motivation is closely related to the self-regard. Self-regard means having a complete understanding of our strengths and weaknesses, and accepting our weaknesses and committed to work on it wherever it is applicable. A person who is high in self-regard is a confident person because he understands his strengths, but also he's a down-to-earth person because he also understands his weaknesses. What we are is defined by our habits, all good and bad habits, and these habits are hardwired patterns at the brain levels. These habits are a function of our cultural influences, past experience, people around you. And we need to undo certain habits at the brain level. And that needs a real intention, commitment. And that's what the real self-motivation is, undoing certain habits at the brain level. that's about the self-motivation. Next is honesty and integrity. We can't command respect. We need to earn respect. Everyone knows that. And one way to earn the credibility is by being consistent with our words and with our actions. This is a huge topic. We won't be going into the deep detail, but one small acid test could be, how comfortable are we to share our screen with anyone at any moment? Are we screen share ready with anyone at any moment? See, being not able to share your screen because you have the confidential and official information is very different than being not able to share your screen because we have a gossipy chats with our co-workers. If that is the case, we might want to reconsider what we are doing. So that's the honesty and integrity. Next, that's my favorite one, optimism and happiness. Mood is a social virus, really contagious. If you are happy, you are more pleasant to be around. And people like to be around more happy and optimistic people. Optimism is an ability to realistically have a positive attitude, especially in the face of adversity. So that's about optimism. Adaptability. Are we afraid of uncertainty, or do we embrace that as a challenge? An adaptable person makes all the necessary arrangements in their life, in their attitude, to adapt to the new situation. So if we are still following, we have just covered the personal competence, and on the personal competence we have seen the 7 skills, and now we will see the social competence. In earlier cluster, personal competence, it focuses inwards, managing our own emotions. In the social competence, it focuses on managing our relationships with others. Empathy. Can we relate to other people? Can we try to be in other person's shoes and try to see the problems from their perspective? Can we go out of our way to help others? That's empathy. Active listening skills, which I'm not good at all in this skill. Oh, meetup team is laughing. I can see that. Okay. And conflict management. How comfortable are you to give and take the criticism? How do you handle the difference in opinions? This is again very important, and I like that. Can you inspire other people to pursue a shared mission? Can you ignite fires? Can you ignite passion, energy in other people? So these are very important skills, and which falls under the social competence. Last one, emotional cognitive competence. Again, this is very important, and especially it becomes important if you are climbing a ladder and going into a leadership role. And as its name suggests, it's a combination of emotional skills and it's a combination of cognitive skills. Are we a person who just likes to focus on our task and our area of interest, or are we a person who is mindful and who knows what's going around us? Can we see a big picture, maybe in our project, department or company? Can we see a big picture? Can we connect the different dots? Can we identify the areas of improvements in different areas which are not our area of interest? Once we identify the areas of improvement, can we come up with an alternate solutions? If we come up with an alternate solutions, can we take these solutions to a respective person, and can we put our proposal effectively in front of them? We often find it very easy to talk with our teams or talk with our subordinates, but how effectively we can have a conversation with our leadership teams like CEOs and CTOs or even business unit lead? How comfortably we can have those conversations, and can we have those meaningful conversations? Can we have those engaged conversations? Do we have that ability? That's what is covered by the emotional cognitive competence. So if you are still following, we were talking about the T-shaped professional. So problem solving, analytical skills, domain expertise, these are the must skills, but also the emotional intelligence skills. Intrapersonal, like self-awareness, self-management, assertiveness, self-motivation. Interpersonal, active listening skills, empathy, inspiring other people. Cognitive emotional, can we see the big picture? Can we connect the dots? Can we come up with the solutions? So that is what actually T-shaped professional is. You Isparo Q Wasatena Ishadu Isuich? Did I say it correctly?
I have no idea what you said.
Oh, really? Oh, shit. I practiced it. Okay, and I used Google Translator. What I meant was, did you find it useful? And please say yes. You don't have any other option to say. Okay, and if you have any question, please ask to Sheldon Cooper. He knows everything. Obrigado.